Chapter 1. The Universal Language of Feelings. Think for a moment about the absolute center of your existence. We like to believe that we are rational creatures, moving through the world guided by cool logic and careful deliberation. We build our lives around schedule, spreadsheets, and well-thought-out plans. Yet, beneath this fragile architecture of reason flows an invisible, rushing current that truly dictates the quality, the direction, and the depth of our lives. That current is our emotional world. Emotions are the invisible directors of our human play. They color every relationship we care about, from the brief, polite exchanges we have with colleagues in a brightly lit hallway to the quiet, vulnerable moments we share with those we love most in the dark. Emotions possess a power so profound that they can easily override what we often consider our most fundamental biological drives. We are wired to survive, to eat, to procreate, but consider how a feeling of absolute disgust can make a starving person turn away from a plate of food. Consider how paralyzing fear or overwhelming despair can completely erase the desire for intimacy. In moments of deep, unrelenting anguish, an individual might even lose the very will to draw their next breath. Our emotions are not just fleeting reactions, they are the ultimate arbiters of human motivation. We organize almost everything we do in a desperate, beautiful attempt to maximize our experience of joy and minimize our encounter with pain. But there is a catch, and it is a catch that creates the central drama of human life. Emotions move with a staggering, breathtaking speed. They ignite much faster than the conscious thinking part of our brain can process. Imagine sitting across a dimly lit dinner table from someone you have trusted for years. The conversation is flowing easily, the atmosphere is relaxed, and then suddenly a casual remark is made. It might be a passing comment about a financial decision or a subtle critique of a life choice. Before you have even formed a conscious thought about what those words mean, your body has already responded. Your heart rate accelerates, a sudden flush of heat rises in your neck, and your facial muscles pull into a tight, defensive mask. You are angry, or perhaps you are terrified, long before your inner voice can ask why. This incredible speed is a biological masterpiece designed to keep us alive. If you are walking down a street and a car suddenly swerves onto the sidewalk, you do not have time to consciously calculate the vehicle's trajectory, mass, and velocity. Your emotional alarm system bypasses your intellect, floods your system with adrenaline, widens your eyes to take in more light, and violently pulls you out of the way. Your emotions save your life in a fraction of a second, but this exact same magnificent high-speed system can completely sabotage us when the perceived threat is not a speeding car, but a misunderstood look from a spouse or a vague email from a boss. Because our emotions trigger so rapidly, we often find ourselves reacting intensely to situations we have fundamentally misread, leaving us to clean up the wreckage of our own defensive words and actions long after the emotional storm has passed. To truly understand this landscape, we have to look past our own individual experiences and ask a much larger question about what it means to be human. For a long time, it was widely assumed that our emotional expressions were essentially just another form of language, invented by society and taught by our parents. We assumed that just as we learn to bow or shake hands, we learn how to arrange our faces when we are sad or overjoyed. But to believe this is to miss the profound, unifying magic of the human design. Imagine leaving everything you know behind and traveling to a remote, completely isolated corner of the globe. Picture stepping into a village that has never been touched by modern media, never seen a television screen, never read a magazine. The architecture is foreign, the clothing is unfamiliar, and the spoken language is an impenetrable wall of sound. You are completely untethered, a stranger in a strange land with no way to communicate. But then, a mother sitting nearby looks down at her newborn child. As the baby coos, the mother's cheeks rise, the muscles around her eyes crinkle, and her lips pull upward. Instantly, the wall falls. You do not need a translator to understand the profound, radiant joy on her face. A moment later, you hear a loud, sudden crash from the forest edge. You look at the men standing near the tree line. Their eyebrows shoot upward, their eyes widen to expose the white sclera, and their jaws drop open. You feel their sudden, electric shock of surprise in your own chest. This happens because the fundamental language of emotion is not a cultural invention. It is our shared human inheritance. The exact same muscular movements that signal terror, agony, disgust, or joy in a bustling modern metropolis are the exact same movements used by someone living entirely off the grid in a distant wilderness. Even more remarkably, individuals who are born entirely without sight, who have never once in their lives witnessed another human face, will instinctively pull those exact same expressions when they feel the corresponding emotions. They do not learn to smile by watching others. The smile is woven into the very fabric of their DNA. We are born into this world already speaking the most important language we will ever use. Yet, if our emotional expressions are entirely universal, why does it so often feel like people from different backgrounds or even different families are speaking entirely different emotional dialects? Why do some people weep openly while others remain stoic? The answer lies in the masks we are taught to wear. While the raw biological spark of an emotion is identical across the human family, society immediately steps in to teach us the rules of the game. From a very young age, we are trained in the art of emotional management. We are taught who is allowed to show which emotion, to whom, and under what circumstances. Think about a high-stakes corporate environment. An executive works tirelessly for a year on a massive project, only to be told in a boardroom meeting that the funding has been entirely pulled. The raw biological reality of that moment is pure anguish and profound disappointment. But the social rules of the boardroom dictate that vulnerability is weakness, and so the executive forcefully swallows the grief, tightens the jaw, and forces a polite, tight smile, masking a devastating internal reality with a socially acceptable veneer. We all do this every single day. We exaggerate our pleasure when receiving a disappointing gift. We hide our terror behind a mask of bravado when stepping up to a podium to speak. We learn to manage our public faces so well that we often fool those closest to us, and sometimes we even fool ourselves. But the masks are never perfect, because emotional expressions are involuntary, because they are hardwired into our ancient nervous system. They cannot be entirely suppressed. Even the most stoic, tightly controlled individual will leak the truth of their internal world. A microexpression, a flash of true feeling lasting only a fraction of a second, will ripple across the face before the conscious mind can pull the mask back into place. A subtle shift in the vocal cords will betray a tremor of fear, even as the words being spoken are confident and strong. The truth of human emotion always wants to be known. Understanding this profound universality changes how we look at the world. It strips away the illusion of isolation. When you realize that the fundamental architecture of your joy, your sorrow, and your rage is shared by every other human being walking the earth, a deep sense of empathy naturally arises. You realize that the aggressive driver, the difficult co-worker, and the distant partner are all being swept along by the exact same invisible currents that move you. We are all navigating the same stormy, beautiful sea. The challenge we face is not to eradicate these feelings. A life without the sharp sting of sadness, the hot fire of anger, or the expansive lift of joy would be a colorless, empty existence. Our emotions are exactly what make life worth living. The true challenge and the journey we are about to undertake is learning how to live beautifully with them. It is about closing the gap between the speed of our emotional reactions and the wisdom of our conscious minds. It is about learning to read the subtle, unspoken truths in the faces of the people we love. And just as importantly, learning to recognize the quiet tremors within our own bodies before they escalate into actions we regret. To do this, we must first understand exactly how the spark catches fire. We must look at the exact moments when our emotional alarms are tripped and discover why, so often, we find ourselves reacting to a world that exists entirely in our own minds. Chapter 2. The Spark. How Feelings Begin. There is a particular kind of regret that almost every human being is intimately familiar with. It is not the regret of a missed opportunity or a word left unsaid. It is the heavy, sinking realization that comes moments, hours, or days after a fierce emotional storm when you look back at your own behavior and think, why on earth did I react that way? Sometimes our emotions serve us perfectly, giving us the exact right amount of energy to assert our boundaries, or the exact right depth of empathy to comfort a grieving friend. But then there are the times our emotions seem to betray us. We might experience the right feeling, but at a wildly disproportionate intensity, like feeling absolute terror over a minor social mistake. Or we might feel the right emotion, but express it in a way that actively harms our own goals, such as responding to a valid critique with a wall of childish silence. But there is a third type of emotional misfire, one that is far more confusing and difficult to unravel. It is when we experience the completely wrong emotion altogether. It is the moment you feel a surge of defensive anger when a partner offers genuine, loving help. It is the sudden wave of profound sadness that washes over you during what should be a joyful celebration. In these moments, it feels as though our internal compass has spun wildly out of control. To understand why this happens, to understand how we can share the exact same smiles and frowns as every other human on Earth, but still react so uniquely to the world around us, we have to look closely at the exact fraction of a second when a feeling is born. We must look at the spark. Imagine you are standing in your kitchen washing dishes. Your mind is miles away, perhaps replaying a conversation from work or anticipating a weekend trip. Your hands are wet and soapy. Suddenly, a heavy glass slips from your grip. Before your conscious mind can even register the sound of the glass sliding against the porcelain sink, before you can consciously formulate the thought, the glass is falling. Your body has already taken over. Your eyes widen to track the blur of motion. Your breath catches. Your hand shoots downward with a speed and precision you could never summon deliberately. You catch the glass inches from the floor. As you stand there holding the saved glass, your heart is hammering against your ribs. Your breathing is shallow and fast. You feel a sudden rush of heat. You are feeling fear, but you did not choose to be afraid. You did not decide to catch the glass. Something else inside of you was watching, evaluating, and acting while your conscious mind was busy daydreaming. This hidden watcher is an incredibly powerful, microscopic system of evaluation that operates continuously just beneath the surface of your awareness. We can think of it as an automatic appraising mechanism. This internal sentry is constantly scanning your environment, sifting through sights, sounds, smells, and subtle shifts in the atmosphere, searching for anything that might threaten your survival or offer a profound reward. When the sentry spots something that matters, it does not ask for your permission to act. It bypasses your intellect entirely, instantly hijacking your nervous system, your facial muscles, and your vocal cords to prepare you for immediate action. This breathtaking speed is the very reason you and your ancestors have survived. If you had to pause and consciously evaluate the trajectory of a falling object, or deliberately think through the physics of a swerving vehicle before deciding to jump out of the way, you would not be here. But this magnificent, life-saving speed comes with a significant cost, because the appraisal happens so fast we are entirely blind to the process. We do not get to witness the internal math our brain is doing. We only experience the result. We suddenly find ourselves in the grip of anger, fear, or despair without fully understanding how we got there. To make these lightning-fast judgments, the automatic appraising mechanism relies on a massive internal database. This database is essentially a catalog of triggers. When the sentry sees a match in the real world, it sounds the alarm. But where does the information in this database come from? Why do some triggers universally affect every human being, while others seem completely unique to you? The foundation of your emotional database was written long before you were born. It is the wisdom of the ages, handed down through countless generations of our ancestors. We are genetically prepared to be intensely sensitive to certain universal themes that governed survival in the ancient world. This is why a human being can be startled into a state of terror by the sudden appearance of a slithering serpentine shape in the grass, even if they have never encountered a snake in their life. We are born with a deeply embedded fear of sudden darkness, of falling, of looming shapes. Notice, however, that we are not born with an instinctive terror of electrical outlets, or speeding metal cars, or loaded firearms. These modern inventions are statistically far more dangerous to us today than spiders or snakes. Yet, a toddler will happily reach for an exposed wire. Our ancestral database has not had the evolutionary time to update to the modern world. We have to be consciously, painstakingly taught to fear the things that actually threaten us today. But our emotional database is not a closed book. It is a living, breathing document. On top of those ancient universal themes, we continuously write our own individual variations based on our unique life experiences. From the moment we are born, our sentry is watching what hurts us, what soothes us, what threatens us, and what brings us joy, adding new entries to the catalogue every single day. This is how our emotional triggers become fiercely personalized. Consider a person who grew up in a household where a parent's heavy, exasperated sigh was always the immediate precursor to a terrifying, explosive rage. For a child in that environment, the sentry learns a vital survival rule. A heavy sigh equals extreme danger. The database is updated. The child learns to feel instant, mobilizing fear the moment that sound hangs in the air, allowing them to hide or appease the parent before the rage erupts. Fast forward 30 years. That child is now a successful adult, sitting in a comfortable living room with a loving, deeply supportive partner. The partner has had a long, grueling day at the office. They sit down on the couch and let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Instantly, the adult's automatic appraising mechanism hears the sound, scans the database, finds the match, and violently pulls the alarm. The adult's heart races, their jaw tightens, and a wave of defensive, terrified anger washes over them. They might snap at their partner or withdraw into a cold silence. The partner is entirely baffled. The adult is confused by their own extreme reaction. The emotional response is completely inappropriate for the current reality of the living room, but it makes perfect, logical sense to the database. The sentry is simply doing its job, protecting the adult from a threat that no longer exists. We frequently find ourselves reacting to ghosts. We live in an emotional country that is governed by the laws of our past, responding to modern inconveniences with ancient survival tactics. While the automatic appraising mechanism is the most common and powerful way our emotions are triggered, it is not the only pathway. The human mind is incredibly complex, and there are other doors through which a feeling can enter. Sometimes a feeling is born not in a fraction of a second, but over the course of hours. You might have a conversation with a colleague that seems perfectly normal on the surface. You say goodbye, walk to your car, and drive home. But as you chop vegetables for dinner, your mind slowly turns the conversation over. You reflect on a specific phrase they used. You consider the context, and then suddenly a realization clicks into place. They were insulting your competence. Only then, hours after the event, does the sentry recognize the threat and release the flood of anger. This is reflective, appraising. It is slower, allowing our conscious mind to play a role, but once the conclusion is reached, the biological cascade of emotion is just as real. We can also summon the spark of emotion entirely from the archives of our own memory. If you sit quietly and deliberately replay a moment of profound betrayal in your mind, vividly picturing the room, the words, the look on the person's face, you will not just remember the event, you will feel it. Your fists will clench, your breathing will change, and the anger will rise fresh and hot in your throat. We do this when we tell stories as well. Relaying a painful loss to a friend can cause us to weep, as if the tragedy just struck. Our bodies do not always know the difference between a present threat and a vividly remembered one. Similarly, our imaginations can conjure emotions out of thin air. We can lie in bed and picture a terrifying hypothetical scenario, a loved one in a car crash, a devastating public humiliation, and our bodies will dutifully flood with adrenaline and fear. We can literally make ourselves sick with anxiety over events that have never happened and likely never will. Perhaps the most beautiful pathway to emotion is our capacity for empathy. We do not even need to experience an event to feel its emotional weight. You can sit in a dark movie theater, watching a fictional character on a glowing screen experience a profound loss, and real, hot tears will stream down your own face. You can see a total stranger weeping on a park bench and feel a heavy, aching sadness bloom in your own chest. We are emotionally porous creatures, capable of catching the feelings of those around us like a contagious spark, jumping from one dry branch to another. We even absorb our emotional triggers through pure symbolism and cultural instruction. We are told by our parents, our communities, and our society what we should feel proud of, what we should feel ashamed of, and what constitutes a violation of our shared norms. The outrage you feel when you see someone blatantly cut to the front of a long line is an emotion triggered by a broken social contract. Finally, there is one pathway to emotion that is so surprising it almost feels like a parlor trick, yet it reveals a profound truth about our biological wiring. The connection between your feelings and your face is not a one-way street. It is a continuous loop. If you deliberately arrange your facial muscles into the precise biological mask of a specific emotion, if you pull your brows down and together, tighten your eyelids, and press your lips into a hard line, something incredible happens. Within seconds, your heart rate will begin to shift. Your body temperature will change. A subtle but undeniable shadow of real anger will begin to cloud your mind. You can actually command your internal emotional state simply by assuming its physical form. Understanding these pathways, knowing exactly how the spark catches fire, is the first critical step toward emotional freedom. As long as we believe that our feelings are just random weather events that happen to us, we remain victims of our own biology. We cannot uninstall the automatic appraising mechanism. We would not want to. We need it to catch the falling glass, to pull us back from the edge of the cliff, to leap at the sound of a true threat. But once we understand that the sentry is reading from a database, and once we recognize that a massive portion of that database was written by our own unique, sometimes flawed, and often outdated history, a profound realization dawns. The database is an open file. If we have learned to be terrified of a heavy sigh, or to be enraged by a minor critique, or to shut down in the face of intimacy, we can unlearn it. It is not easy, and it requires a kind of fierce, courageous self-awareness. But we have the power to step in between the spark and the flame, to gently take the pen away from our past and begin to rewrite the rules of our own hearts. Chapter 3. Rewiring the Mind. Modifying our triggers. Imagine standing on a glass observation deck, suspended 100 stories above a bustling city. You can look down past your own shoes and see tiny yellow taxis weaving through traffic thousands of feet below. Your intellect is perfectly calm. You know exactly how thick the glass is. You know the structural engineering is flawless. You know that thousands of people have stood on this exact spot without incident. Yet, despite this fortress of logical knowledge, your heart hammers against your ribs. Your palms grow slick with sweat, and a primal voice screams at you to step back onto solid ground. The profound truth of this moment is that your emotions simply do not care about what your intellect knows. The danger is felt deeply in your bones, even though it does not objectively exist. This beautifully illustrates one of the most challenging aspects of our human design. Our knowledge cannot always override the automatic alarms sounding in our bodies. But there is a second, far more dangerous way that our emotions overpower our logic. Emotions do not just ignore our intellect, they actively hijack it. When we are gripped by a powerful feeling, that emotion places a thick, distorting lens over our perception of reality. We lose access to information that would contradict how we are feeling, and we desperately seek out information that justifies it. Think about a time you waited for someone you love at a restaurant. 10 minutes pass, then 20, then 30. They are not answering their phone. As you sit there, an old, familiar narrative begins to whisper in your mind. You tell yourself that they do not respect your time. You remind yourself of every other instance where you felt pushed to the bottom of their priority list. By the time they finally walk through the door, your heart is armored and you are radiating a cold, righteous fury. They sit down, breathless and deeply apologetic, and explain that a truck overturned on the highway, completely trapping them in a dead zone without cell service. Now, logic dictates that your anger should instantly vanish. They were not ignoring you. They were a victim of circumstance. But does the anger simply disappear? Usually, it does not. You might find yourself snapping, "You should have checked the traffic before you left!" You cling to your irritation, twisting the new facts to keep the fire burning. This happens because you have entered what is known as a refractory period. During this window of time, your mind acts like a fortress under siege, violently rejecting any new information that does not support the emotion currently running through your veins. The emotion desperately wants to justify its own existence. If this refractory window lasts only a few seconds, just long enough to keep you focused during a genuine crisis, it is a brilliant survival mechanism. But when this window stays open for hours or even days, we cause terrible damage to the people we love most. We become trapped in an emotional tunnel, entirely blind to the complex, nuanced reality unfolding around us. Why do these periods stretch on for so long? Why do we hold on to anger or despair or fear long after the evidence suggests we are safe? Often, it is because we are not just reacting to the present moment. We are importing a script from our past. Imagine a bright, capable professional who receives a piece of gentle, highly constructive feedback from a mentor. The mentor's tone is warm, and their intention is purely to help. Yet, the professional feels a sudden, blinding flash of defensive rage. They lash out, burning a valuable bridge, and later sit in their car, trembling and entirely confused by their own extreme reaction. What they could not see in the moment was that they were not reacting to the kind mentor. They were reacting to a ghost. Early in their life, perhaps during childhood, feedback was never a tool for growth. It was a weapon used by a harsh, demanding caregiver to humiliate and control. Their internal database learned a devastating rule. Any critique is a threat to your basic worth. So 30 years later, the moment a critique is offered, the old script is pulled from the archives and played at full volume. The professional is fighting a war that ended decades ago. When we realize that we are carrying these outdated scripts, our first instinct is usually a desperate desire to delete them. We want to find the specific trigger, the fear of abandonment, the sensitivity to criticism, the terror of failure, and simply erase it from our hard drive so we never have to feel that irrational pain again. But our emotional architecture was not built with a delete key. The neurological pathways that hold our deepest emotional learnings are incredibly resilient. Once a trigger is fused to a survival response, the connection becomes practically indelible. Our nervous system is designed to hold on to the memory of danger, not to discard it. If you learn that fire burns, your brain ensures you never have to relearn that lesson. This permanence keeps us alive, but it makes the task of unlearning a psychological trigger a profound struggle. We cannot simply erase the spark. What we can do, however, is cool the trigger down. We can weaken the connection between the event and the explosion. But how difficult this task is depends on several powerful variables in our emotional history. First, we must consider how closely our personal trigger resembles the ancient universal survival themes hardwired into our species. Consider the phenomenon of road rage. A perfectly rational, mild-mannered person might become absolutely incensed when another driver cuts them off in traffic. That same person might calmly accept a devastating critique of a project they spent months building. Why does the minor traffic slight provoke a heavier reaction than the career setback? Because a car violently swerving into your path is a close physical echo of an ancient survival threat, a physical body thwarting your forward movement. So the closer our modern frustration mirrors a primal threat, the hotter the trigger burns, and the harder it is to cool down. The difficulty of rewiring a trigger also depends heavily on the age of the wound. The emotional lessons we absorb in our earliest years of life, before our rational minds are fully formed to contextualize them, sink the deepest roots. We learn the shape of love, danger, and worthiness long before we have the vocabulary to describe them. A trigger forged in the vulnerable fires of early childhood will always require more patience to dismantle than a fear learned in adulthood. We must also respect the initial heat and density of the events that created the trigger. If a specific fear or sensitivity was born out of an overwhelmingly traumatic moment or forged through years of relentless daily repetition, the alarm system is set to a hair trigger sensitivity. The emotional brain believes that vigilance is the only thing keeping you alive. We each also possess our own unique baseline, an emotional fingerprint that dictates how fast we ignite and how long we burn. Some of us are born with a long, slow fuse, while others are built to flare instantly. Understanding your natural emotional tempo is crucial because fighting against your own nature only breeds exhaustion. So, how do we actually do the work of rewiring our minds? How do we stop the ghosts of our past from haunting our present relationships? The work begins by becoming an emotional detective in your own life. You must start tracking the storms. When you find yourself reacting with a sudden, disproportionate intensity, do not simply sweep the wreckage under the rug and move on. Once the refractory period has passed and your mind is clear, look back at the rubble. Ask yourself, what exactly was the match that lit the fire? Was it a specific tone of voice? Was it the feeling of being ignored? Was it the subtle implication that you were not smart enough or valuable enough? Once you identify the shape of the trigger, you can begin the profound work of reappraisal. Reappraisal is the act of consciously providing your mind with an alternative narrative. If your hot trigger is a fear of being dismissed and a colleague does not reply to your urgent email, your automatic response will be a surge of anxious anger. Your script says, I do not matter to them. But if you have done the detective work, you can catch that thought before it hardens into reality. You can actively tell yourself, they are managing a crisis today. This silence has nothing to do with my worth. This takes immense, repetitive effort. But over time, by consistently challenging the outdated scripts, you slowly drain the power from the trigger. You widen the gap between the event and the reaction. You give yourself the ultimate human gift, the space to choose your response. Yet, even when we do this magnificent, difficult work, we must be prepared for the days when the system seems to fail entirely. We must understand the dark, lingering fog of moods. An emotion is a sharply defined weather event, a sudden thunderstorm, a localized tornado. A mood is a completely different climate. An emotion might last for seconds or minutes, but a mood settles into the bones, lasting for hours, days, or even an entire season. When we are caught in an emotion, we can usually point directly to the cause, but a mood often descends without a clear invitation. You simply wake up feeling irritable, or blue, or profoundly apprehensive. The danger of a mood is that it severely restricts our emotional flexibility. A mood actively hunts for an emotion to justify its presence. If you wake up in an irritable mood, you are wearing dark glasses that filter out the good in the world. You will actively look for reasons to be angry. A comment you would normally brush off becomes an intolerable insult. A minor delay becomes a personal attack. More importantly, a mood has the power to instantly reheat triggers that you have spent years successfully cooling down. The ghost you thought you had banished returns, energized by the heavy atmosphere of your irritability or sorrow. We do not choose our moods, and we cannot simply order them to leave. But by deeply understanding how they operate, we can strip them of their destructive power. When you realize that you are moving through the fog of a mood, you can lower your expectations of yourself and others. You can recognize that the lens is distorted, and you can consciously choose to delay important decisions or difficult conversations until the climate clears. We are not attempting to build a life devoid of emotional reaction. A perfectly flat, untriggered existence would be a tragedy. We are simply trying to step out of the shadows of our own history. We are learning the architecture of our own minds so that when the spark ignites, we are no longer helpless victims of the flame, but conscious keepers of the fire. Chapter 4. The Outward Ripple. Expressing and Managing Feelings. Imagine you are standing outside a closed door, about to walk into a room where your future hangs in the balance. It might be a conversation with a partner that will determine the survival of your relationship, or a meeting with a superior regarding a failure that was entirely out of your control. You know exactly what you want to say. You have rehearsed the logic, memorized the facts, and planned your physical posture. But as your hand touches the doorknob, a cold truth washes over you. You cannot entirely trust your own body. You know that if the conversation takes an unexpected turn, the sting of injustice might bring hot tears to your eyes, or a sudden wave of defensive anger might sharpen your voice into a weapon. In high-stakes moments, our emotions push to the surface, demanding to be seen and heard, constantly threatening to shatter our carefully constructed composure. There are times when we all wish we possessed a master switch to simply turn our emotions off. We imagine how much easier life would be if we could navigate conflicts with the cool, detached precision of a machine, feeling nothing and revealing nothing. But to possess such a switch would be a devastating curse. If we could not broadcast our feelings, we would become entirely illegible to the people around us. Think of a parent caring for a newborn child. If that infant had no capacity to express distress through a piercing cry or comfort through a softening face, the parent would be completely adrift, guessing at survival needs in a terrifying void. Even in adult relationships, the constant, unspoken broadcast of our emotional state is the very glue that holds our social world together. If you could not read the subtle warmth in a friend's eyes or the flash of genuine concern on a spouse's face, intimacy would be impossible. We would be surrounded by strangers wearing impenetrable masks. The fact that our emotions are public, that they leak out of us through the tightening of a jaw or the pitch of our voice, is not a design flaw. It is a vital system of connection. Our thoughts are entirely private, but our feelings are meant to be shared. Yet, this broadcasting system is rarely neat or simple. When a feeling sparks, it initiates a massive, involuntary cascade of physical changes. Your autonomic nervous system shifts gears instantly. If anger flares, blood rushes to your hands, preparing you to strike or defend, making your skin hot. If fear takes over, blood is redirected to the large muscles of your legs, preparing you to flee, leaving your hands icy and trembling. Your breathing changes rhythm, your heart accelerates, and your posture alters. You might feel the primal urge to step aggressively forward, or the sudden, heavy instinct to shrink and hide. These massive internal shifts are accompanied by the two most powerful loudspeakers of human emotion, the face and the voice. The voice is an extraordinary alarm system because it demands attention even when we are not looking. You can be in another room, facing a wall, and instantly know from the sharp, brittle edge of your partner's voice that they are furious. While we can choose to remain silent to hide our vocal cues, the moment we open our mouths, the truth of our emotional state vibrates through our vocal cords. The face, however, is always on display, and while we can learn to suppress our gross motor movements, we can easily stop ourselves from throwing a punch or running out of a room, we have far less conscious control over the tiny, delicate muscles surrounding our eyes and mouth. Because we have been taught since childhood to manage our behavior, we often try to suppress these outward ripples. Some individuals become masters of containment, presenting a face of absolute stony indifference during moments of intense conflict. They retreat behind a wall of ice, offering zero response to a partner's rising distress. From the outside, they appear completely unfeeling. But if you were to measure the heart rate, the blood pressure, and the sweat on the skin of someone hiding behind this wall of silence, you would find a system in absolute overdrive. They are not feeling nothing. They are feeling so much that their system has gone into a state of overwhelmed lockdown. This brings us to one of the most profound dangers in human relationships, the trap of misinterpretation. Because our emotions are so visible, we frequently assume that we know exactly what is going on inside someone else. But there is a crucial rule to remember. An emotional signal, a tear, a raised voice, a trembling lip only tells you that an emotion is occurring. It never, ever tells you the source of that emotion. Imagine a stern, highly demanding manager calling an employee into an office to discuss a missing financial document. The document is highly sensitive, and its disappearance is a major crisis. As the manager asks where the file might be, the employee's face drains of color. Their eyes dart toward the door, their breath becomes shallow, and their voice shakes. The manager looks at this unmistakable display of terror and makes an immediate assumption: the employee is guilty. The manager assumes the terror is the fear of being caught, but what the manager cannot see is the employee's internal reality. The employee knows exactly where the file is. It was securely locked in a different department's safe by another executive. The employee is entirely innocent. Their terror is not the fear of being caught in a lie. It is the sheer paralyzing fear of being disbelieved by an aggressive authority figure whose temper is legendary in the office. The fear of an innocent person who knows they look guilty is biologically identical to the fear of a thief who has been caught red-handed. The signal is the same. The source is entirely different. When we project our own assumptions onto the emotional displays of others, we risk causing catastrophic damage to our relationships. We make this same error with ourselves. The stream of our own emotions is rarely a single, pure note. We frequently experience feelings about our own feelings. A person might feel a sudden surge of fear regarding a medical diagnosis and seconds later feel intense anger at themselves for being afraid, believing they should be stronger. When they speak to their family, they sound furious, aggressive, and abrasive. The family recoils from the anger, entirely missing the terrified vulnerability buried just one layer beneath the surface. Our emotional responses are governed by a kind of open-source operating system in the brain. The base code of this system was written by our ancient ancestors, ensuring that our heart rates spike and our eyes widen when we are threatened. But the system is open, meaning that throughout our lives, we constantly write new code based on our experiences. If we learn that raising our voice gets us what we want, that behavioral action becomes fused into our anger response. If we learn that crying makes people pull away from us, we write code that violently suppresses our tears, converting our sadness into cold withdrawal. Once these learned actions are written into the system, they operate just as automatically as our ancient reflexes. The profound question is, if these physical responses, vocal shifts, and learned actions happen automatically in a fraction of a second, do we have any real control over how we behave? Are we destined to simply act out the code written by our past? The answer is found in a concept we can call emotional attentiveness. It is the incredibly difficult, beautiful practice of taking a step back inside your own mind while the emotional storm is raging. Most of the time, when we are angry or terrified, we are entirely consumed by the feeling. We are not observing our anger. We simply are the anger. The feeling justifies itself, demanding immediate action. But attentiveness is the ability to recognize the physical sensations of an emotion as an early warning system. It is noticing the heat rising in your neck, the tightening of your jaw, or the sudden shallowness of your breath, and thinking, I am becoming fiercely angry right now. That split second of internal recognition is the difference between a reaction and a response. You cannot stop the heart rate from spiking, and you may not be able to stop the initial flash of anger on your face. But if you catch the feeling in your awareness, you can insert a wedge of daylight between the emotion and your physical actions. You can choose to close your mouth. You can choose to relax your hands. You can choose to lower the volume of your voice. This mastery is rarely achieved in the heat of the moment without prior practice. The true laboratory for emotional growth exists in the quiet aftermath of our failures. Consider a parent waiting up at 2 in the morning for a teenager who missed a midnight curfew. For 2 hours, the parent paces the floor, consumed by terrifying visions of car accidents and hospital waiting rooms. The parent's system is flooded with the adrenaline of pure, agonizing fear. Then, a key turns in the lock. The teenager strolls in, perfectly safe, smelling of pizza and laughing at a text message. In a fraction of a second, the parent's terror vanishes, replaced by an explosive, blinding rage. The parent screams, levies disproportionate punishments and shames the child, unleashing all the stored physical energy of the past 2 hours. In the immediate aftermath, the parent feels entirely justified. But the next morning, in the quiet light of day, regret settles in. The parent realizes the anger was destructive. To master this for the future, the parent must sit down and dissect the episode without self-condemnation. They must realize that the anger was a secondary emotion, a violent armor used to protect against the agonizing vulnerability of the earlier fear. They must map the sequence. The missed deadline triggered fear, the safe arrival triggered relief, and the sudden release of tension immediately morphed into an attack. By analyzing this sequence, the parent prepares for the next storm. The next time the curfew is broken, the parent will still feel the terrifying adrenaline, but because they have studied their own emotional machinery, they can anticipate the transition. When the key turns in the lock, they can be attentive to the sudden surge of heat in their chest. They can take a deep breath, recognizing the urge to scream, and instead say, I have been terrified for 2 hours. We will discuss the consequences of this tomorrow, but right now I need to calm down. This is the ultimate goal of managing our feelings. We are not attempting to become flat, emotionless voids. We want to feel the full, rich depth of human experience. We want our emotions to be proportional to the events that cause them, to express them in a way that is true to our internal reality, but in a manner that does no unnecessary harm to the people around us or to ourselves. We want to honor the spark, but control the flame. To do this effectively, we must move beyond the mechanics of how emotions generally operate and begin to explore the distinct, profound personalities of the specific feelings that shape our lives. We must wade into the deep waters of human sorrow, exploring the heavy, universal ache of loss, and discover why our moments of greatest agony are also the very moments that forge our deepest bonds. Chapter 5. The Depths of Sorrow, Navigating Sadness and Agony. There is a profound, echoing silence that settles into a home after a deeply loved one is permanently gone. Imagine an older man, weeks after his partner of 40 years has passed away. The chaotic blur of the hospital, the funeral arrangements, and the crowded house full of well-meaning relatives have all faded away, leaving him standing alone in the center of their bedroom. He opens a closet door to put away a pair of shoes, and his hand brushes against a wool scarf she used to wear on winter walks. Without thinking, he lifts it, and the faint, unmistakable scent of her perfume hits him. In that singular fraction of a second, the intellectual knowledge of her death vanishes, replaced by the crushing biological reality of loss. His knees give out, he sinks to the floor, and a sound breaks from his chest that is raw, guttural, and wild. This is not a quiet, melancholic sigh. This is agony. When we talk about the emotional realm of sorrow, we often use the word sadness as a catch-all term for any experience of feeling down. But true, profound sorrow actually has two entirely distinct faces: the active, tearing pain of agony and the heavy, quiet resignation of sadness. In those moments on the closet floor, the man is in agony. Agony is an active state of protest. It is the human heart refusing to accept reality. The loud weeping, the desperate vocalizations, the physical tension, these are all biological attempts to deal actively with the source of the loss, almost as if the sheer force of our protest could pull the lost person or the lost object back into existence. But the human body cannot sustain that level of intense, active suffering forever. Eventually, the tears slow. The vocal cords grow raw and tired. The energy required for agony depletes, and the man slumps against the wall, staring blankly at the floorboards. The physical tension drains from his body, his posture collapses, and a profound lethargy takes over. He has shifted from agony into sadness. Sadness is characterized by passivity, resignation, and a feeling of utter helplessness. It is the quiet, heavy realization that the loss is permanent, and there is absolutely nothing that can be done to reverse it. These two states do not happen once and then disappear. The deepest losses we experience, the death of a child, the end of a lifelong marriage, the sudden destruction of our health, or even the loss of our fundamental self-esteem, plunge us into a cycle where sadness and agony alternate in waves. We sit in the quiet fog of sadness until a memory, a scent, or a realization spikes the pain back into the active protest of agony again and again. It is one of the longest lasting emotional experiences a human being can endure. Yet, even in the darkest trenches of this grief, sorrow is rarely the only emotion present. The human heart is complex, and grief is a tangled web of overlapping feelings. The grieving man holding the scarf might suddenly feel a hot flash of anger. Anger at the doctors who could not save her. Anger at the universe for its cruelty, or even an irrational, deeply human anger at his partner for leaving him alone. He might feel a terrifying surge of fear, wondering how he will possibly navigate the mechanics of daily survival, or pay the bills, or simply endure the lonely evenings without her presence. There is a fascinating and deeply moving phenomenon concerning how we express this profound grief. We often assume that the moment a tragic loss occurs, the full weight of agony is immediately unleashed. But humans are profoundly social creatures, and our emotions are deeply tied to our connections with others. Consider a mother who receives a devastating phone call while traveling alone in a foreign city. She may pack her bags, navigate the airports, and endure a grueling 15-hour flight back to her family in a state of absolute stony silence. She appears entirely composed, perhaps even detached. But the very second she walks through her front door and locks eyes with her sister, the dam breaks and the agony pours out. Sometimes we cannot truly experience the full depth of our agony until we are in the presence of someone who can witness it and share our loss. The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the pain requires a safe, social container to be fully expressed. Our biology knows that to collapse in agony while utterly alone in a vulnerable environment is physically dangerous. We hold the pain in a state of shock, waiting until we are surrounded by our tribe, our people, before we allow the truth to break us. This reveals the brilliant evolutionary purpose behind the physical expression of sadness and agony. Why do we cry? Why do the inner corners of our eyebrows pull sharply upward and together? Why do our cheeks raise, and why do our lower lips push up and quiver? These are movements that are incredibly difficult to fake voluntarily. They are an authentic, involuntary broadcast to the world around us. The physical mask of agony, accompanied by the universal sound of weeping, is a biological beacon. It is a distress signal screaming out to our community, "I am suffering, I am helpless. Please comfort me." When we see a stranger weeping on a park bench or a child crying out in fear, we feel an immediate visceral pull in our own chests. That empathetic resonance is the glue of human society. It compels us to reach out, to put an arm around a trembling shoulder, to offer comfort and to help. Our tears do not just release internal pressure, they actively summon the community to our side to help us survive a blow we cannot survive alone. Because of this intense vulnerability, many people spend their entire lives desperately running from sadness. In many cultures, the physical display of grief is mistakenly labeled as a sign of weakness. Some individuals feel deeply ashamed of their own tears, interpreting their agony as a humiliating failure of independence. To protect themselves from this vulnerability, they learn to mask their sadness with a completely different emotion: anger. Anger feels powerful. It feels active, energized, and heavily armored. When a person feels the terrifying vulnerability of being rejected or abandoned, they may instantly convert that welling sadness into a fiery rage. They push people away with harsh words and rigid boundaries, preferring to be seen as hostile rather than broken. While this may temporarily protect them from feeling helpless, it tragically short-circuits the very mechanism designed to heal them. By projecting anger instead of sorrow, they drive away the very comfort, empathy, and social support that their heart actually requires to recover. In our modern world, we often try to pathologize the painful, necessary work of grief. There is a growing tendency to treat the profound, crushing weight of a normal loss as if it were a medical emergency to be immediately numbed. It is absolutely crucial to draw a firm, bright line between the natural process of mourning and the clinical reality of a depressive disorder. Depression is a life-threatening emotional disorder where sadness and agony flood the system completely, stripping away a person's ability to sleep, eat, work, or maintain relationships for months or years on end. In a depressive state, the individual feels not just helpless, but entirely hopeless, convinced that life will never improve, and that they are fundamentally worthless. Normal, healthy grief, no matter how excruciating, is different. Even in the deepest, darkest weeks of mourning a catastrophic loss, a grieving person will still experience brief, fleeting moments of other emotions. They might share a sudden, tearful laugh with a friend while remembering a funny story about the person they lost. They will experience the warmth of a hug. Their agony will ebb and flow. If we attempt to artificially flatten every painful spike of normal grief, if we aggressively numb the agony of a profound loss, we risk interfering with the natural healing process. By erasing the outward signs of suffering, we silence the biological beacon that calls our friends and family to our side. Without the tears, without the visible ache, the people around us may assume we are fine and withhold the vital, healing attention we actually need. Furthermore, feeling the full, unvarnished weight of the loss honors the depth of the attachment. It is the cost of love. Learning to navigate sadness is not about finding a way to never feel it again. It is about understanding the physical sensations as they arise. The ache in the back of the throat, the heaviness in the chest, the drooping of the eyelids, and allowing them to run their natural, necessary course. It is about having the courage to let the mask fall when you are safely surrounded by those you trust, and having the grace to answer the call when you see the unmistakable signs of agony in the face of another. Chapter 6. The Fire Within. Channeling Anger. There is a moment right before the storm breaks, a sudden electric shift in the atmosphere of your own body. You might be sitting in a tedious meeting, listening to a colleague take credit for months of your grueling, unacknowledged hard work. Or you might be standing in your kitchen, listening to a partner deliver a casual, cutting remark about a vulnerability you thought was safe with them. Before your mind has fully articulated the betrayal, the biological furnace ignites. Blood rushes forcefully to your hands, making them physically warmer, preparing your fists to strike or defend. Your heart rate accelerates, pumping heavily against your ribs, and your breath grows shallow and fast. A fierce, defensive energy surges through your nervous system. You are experiencing the most volatile, dangerous, and misunderstood emotion in the human repertoire. You are on fire. To understand the primal roots of this fire, we must look at the very beginning of human life. If you want to reliably summon anger in a newborn infant, you do not need to insult them or take away their food. You simply need to hold their arms down so they cannot move. The moment an infant experiences physical restraint, they will slash and thrash, fighting wildly to remove the obstacle. This early, instinctive struggle against physical confinement is the ultimate metaphor for what triggers our fury as adults. We become angry whenever someone or something interferes with what we are deeply intent on doing. When we are stuck in unyielding traffic while rushing to a critical appointment, or when we are constantly interrupted by someone who refuses to let us finish our thought, we feel the exact same psychological suffocation as the infant whose arms are pinned. We slash and thrash with our words, our tone, and our posture, desperate to destroy the obstacle in our path. While interference is the core theme, the variations of this trigger are vast and deeply personal. We feel a terrifying, aggressive heat when we are physically threatened, but we experience the exact same biological rage when we are psychologically threatened by insults or denigration. We can even become intensely angry at inanimate objects, cursing a malfunctioning computer, or feeling a sharp flash of frustration at our own failing memory when we cannot recall a crucial piece of information. Yet there is a profound, tragic paradox woven into the fabric of this emotion. It is a strange and painful truth that we often experience the most intense, destructive anger toward the people we love the most. When we begin a romantic relationship, we construct beautiful, towering fantasies about our partner, and we feel a deep, burning disappointment when they inevitably fail to meet that impossible ideal. Because we have dropped our armor around them, because they know our deepest fears and our ultimate weaknesses, they possess the unique power to wound us with surgical precision. The sheer vulnerability of intimacy means that rejection by a loved one can instantly trigger a furious, retaliatory rage. It feels infinitely safer to wrap our broken hearts in the hot armor of fury than to stand shivering in the cold reality of abandonment. This is why anger is the face of attack. It is an emotion designed to control, to punish, and to retaliate. But this protective mechanism comes with a devastating design flaw. Anger almost always calls forth anger in return. It takes a character of near-saintly restraint to receive the heat of another person's self-righteous fury and not instantly ignite in response. When a partner raises their voice and hurls an accusation, our own automatic appraising system registers a profound threat and instantly arms us for battle. The cycle escalates with terrifying speed, rapidly transforming a minor disagreement into a devastating war of attrition, leaving behind a trail of words that can never be unspoken. The tragedy is that in the heat of this escalation, we completely lose our ability to read the truth of our own faces. Long before we have consciously decided to engage in a fight, our facial muscles are broadcasting our hostility to the target. The eyebrows are pulled down forcefully and drawn together, creating a hard, unyielding glare in the eyes. The jaw thrusts aggressively forward, but perhaps the most telling involuntary signal is the tightening of the mouth. The lips press together so firmly that the red margins of the lips actually narrow and begin to disappear. This thinning of the lips is an incredibly early, reliable sign of anger. It is so automatic and difficult to inhibit that a friend or spouse will often notice the hostility in our thinned lips and tightened voice long before we ourselves have consciously recognized that we are mad. Because this emotion is so visible and so socially disruptive, we have developed a myriad of ways to express it, ranging from mild, fleeting annoyance to absolute explosive rage. We might wrap our anger in the passive, heavy silence of sulking, or display the exhausted, impatient sighs of exasperation. But when the fire is not allowed to burn cleanly, it turns toxic. When we hold on to an offense, our anger morphs into resentment, a long-standing, simmering hostility tied to a specific, unresolved grievance. If that resentment is allowed to fester and deepen, it can petrify into hatred, an enduring and intense dislike that can completely take over a person's life, keeping them permanently chained to the person who harmed them. For a long time, popular psychology suggested that the best way to handle this dangerous heat was to aggressively vent it, to punch pillows, scream in empty rooms, or brutally confront the offender. We were told that getting the anger out was necessary for our health. But the truth is far more complex and far more demanding of our maturity. Unleashing aggressive anger does not reliably heal us. In fact, expressing our anger violently or abusively often makes the situation infinitely worse. Angry, explosive actions permanently damage the trust in our relationships invite fierce retaliation and cause us to be viewed by our communities as socially unattractive and unsafe. Furthermore, harboring this hostility takes a severe, measurable toll on the human body. When individuals, particularly those with naturally hostile personalities, sit and vividly recount past moments of anger, they do not just remember the events, their bodies actually relive the fury. Their heart rates accelerate and their blood pressure spikes, putting the exact same strain on their cardiovascular system as running up a steep flight of stairs. By clinging to old offenses, we continuously poison our own physical vessel. Suppressing our anger is not inherently dangerous to our medical health, provided we feel a sense of control over the situation and view our frustration as a problem to be solved, rather than a wound to be sullenly protected. The path to mastery over this incredibly powerful emotion is not to eradicate it, but to change our relationship to it. We must learn the profound art of the pause. When the heat rises in your chest and the undeniable urge to strike back with a cruel word floods your mind, you must use that physical sensation as an alarm bell. It is the signal to step back into the quiet space of your own awareness. From that vantage point, you can attempt the most difficult, transformative task in human conflict. You must separate the offensive action from the person who committed it. If a colleague acts selfishly or a partner acts thoughtlessly, your anger is a vital, necessary signal that a boundary has been crossed and an injustice has occurred. It is a powerful motivation to stop the interference and demand change. But if you view the offender as a fundamentally flawed, malicious enemy who must be destroyed, your anger becomes a weapon of revenge. If, however, you can recognize that they are likely acting out of their own stress, ignorance, or flawed humanity, you can address the action without attacking their character. You can be fiercely firm, setting an immovable boundary with strength and determination, without ever needing to insult, denigrate, or humiliate the person standing in front of you. Anger is not an evil force. It is the heavy, protective door of the human heart. It demands justice. It protects the vulnerable, and it insists that our dignity be honored. But a door that swings wildly in the wind eventually tears itself off the hinges, destroying the very house it was meant to protect. By learning to feel the heat without being consumed by the flames, by choosing our words with deliberate, compassionate strength, we transform our anger from a destructive wildfire into a focused, illuminating light. Chapter 7. The Sudden Shift. The Mechanics of Surprise and Fear. There is a feeling that moves through the human nervous system faster than any other, a flash of electricity so rapid it is over almost the moment it begins. Imagine walking into your home after a long, exhausting day, expecting nothing but the quiet hum of the refrigerator. You reach for the light switch, flip it upward, and suddenly a dozen hidden voices shout your name in unison in that singular fraction of a second. Before your brain can process the balloons, the smiling faces, or the cake on the table, your jaw drops, your eyes widen, and your breath hitches. You have just experienced surprise, which is uniquely characterized as the briefest of all the human emotions, rarely lasting more than a few seconds at most. This fleeting nature is exactly what makes surprise so fascinating. It is not designed to linger. Rather, it serves as a temporary bridge, a momentary pause that passes the instant we figure out what is actually happening around us. Once your intellect catches up to the sudden shift in your environment, the surprise instantly melts away and merges into a completely different emotion. If the shouting voices in the dark room belong to your closest friends throwing a celebration, your surprise instantly dissolves into profound amusement and joy. If, however, the sudden noise in the dark comes from shattering glass and a stranger's heavy footstep, that exact same spark of surprise instantly hardens into icy fear. Sometimes, if the sudden noise is simply a book falling off a shelf, the surprise is followed by no emotion at all, evaporating into nothing. as we determine the event, is of zero consequence. Because this emotion acts as a doorway rather than a destination, there is a fundamental requirement for it to occur. Surprise can only be triggered by an event that is entirely sudden and unexpected. If a situation unfolds slowly, allowing our minds to anticipate the outcome, we are robbed of the capacity to be surprised. This neutral quality has led some scholars to debate whether surprise should even be classified as an emotion, arguing that true emotions must be inherently pleasant or deeply unpleasant. Yet, to anyone who has ever experienced it, that brief suspended moment before the mind calculates the reality of a situation certainly feels like a powerful emotional state. It is a state of raw vulnerability that some people actively crave, purposefully leaving their lives unplanned to invite the thrill of the unexpected, while others dedicate massive amounts of energy to avoiding it entirely, demanding absolute predictability in their environments. It is vital, however, to distinguish the emotion of surprise from a purely biological phenomenon that looks similar but operates under entirely different rules. Imagine sitting in a perfectly silent library, deep in thought, when someone drops a massive stack of heavy textbooks directly behind your chair. Your body violently jerks. This is not surprise, this is the startle reflex. Startle is a hardwired physical reflex, not a nuanced emotion. In fact, if we look closely at the human face, the startle expression is the exact biological opposite of the surprise expression. While surprise pulls our eyes wide open and raises our brows to take in more information, the startle reflex aggressively forces our eyes to close tightly, lowers our brows, and violently stretches our lips. Furthermore, startle operates on a rigidly fixed timeline, appearing in exactly 1/4 of a second and vanishing completely in 1/2 of a second. It is so deeply ingrained in our survival circuitry that absolutely no one can inhibit the startle reaction, even if they are warned ahead of time that a loud noise is about to occur. While surprise is a doorway, fear is the heavy, armored room we often find ourselves pushed into. When the unexpected event reveals a threat, our biology instantly shifts gears. The core theme that unites every experience of fear is the threat of harm, whether that harm is physical or psychological. Our ancestors survived because they were hardwired to react instantly to certain unlearned triggers, such as the sudden loss of support that signals a deadly fall, or the terrifying sight of an object hurling rapidly through space toward our bodies. The anticipation of physical pain itself is an ancient, unlearned trigger that requires no prior experience to invoke terror. But our emotional database is vast and deeply personal. We can easily learn to become intensely afraid of almost anything, even situations that pose no actual danger to our physical safety. A patient lying in a hospital bed might feel their heart race with groundless panic, simply because a doctor is attaching the harmless wires of an electrocardiogram machine, mistakenly believing the device will deliver a painful electric shock. Because these learned fears are so subjective, it requires a well-developed capacity for profound compassion to sit with someone, validate their terror, and patiently reassure them when they are afraid of something that does not frighten us at all. When genuine fear strikes, evolution generally forces our bodies into one of two primary survival actions: hiding or fleeing. In the fraction of a second that a threat is perceived, our autonomic nervous system often commands us to freeze entirely, a deeply ingrained instinct designed to decrease the likelihood of being detected by a predator. If freezing fails, the body prepares for explosive movement. Blood is rapidly diverted away from our extremities and channeled directly into the large muscles of our legs, physically preparing us to flee. If flight is impossible and we are backed into a corner, fear will rapidly mutate. When we cannot freeze or flee from a threat, the most likely biological response is to become intensely angry at whatever is threatening us. This is why fear and anger are intimate companions, often occurring in rapid, disorienting succession. We might feel terror in the face of a dangerous driver swerving into our lane, and the very second the danger passes, we are consumed by a violent, shaking rage at their recklessness. Perhaps the most fascinating mechanic of fear is how drastically it alters based on our ability to take action. The human mind processes an immediate threat very differently than an impending one. Imagine driving down a winding mountain road in the dead of winter. Your tires suddenly hit a patch of black ice, and the vehicle begins to violently spin toward the edge of a steep drop. In those 5 harrowing seconds, you are facing an immediate, lethal threat. But interestingly, you likely do not feel the agonizing sensations of fear in that exact moment. When we can actively cope with an immediate threat, our consciousness narrows, hyper-focusing entirely on the task at hand. Your hands grip the wheel, your eyes track the spin, and your body executes rapid corrections. During an immediate threat, our response is geared toward action, and the brain actually produces an analgesic effect, actively reducing our sensation of pain to help us survive. It is usually only after the car comes to a safe halt, when the action is over, that the overwhelming wave of terror finally crashes over you. Now contrast this with an entirely different kind of danger. Imagine sitting in a sterile, quiet clinic, waiting 5 agonizing days for a doctor to call with the results of a critical biopsy. This is an impending threat. Because the danger is in the future, there are no immediate actions you can take to save yourself. When there is absolutely nothing to do but wait, the human mind spirals into profound terror. The worry about an impending threat leads to a state of exhausting vigilance, chronic muscular tension, and an effect that actually magnifies our perception of pain rather than dulling it. We become consumed by panic simply because we are denied the grace of action. Understanding these mechanics transforms how we view our own anxieties. Every experience of fear we endure can be charted by understanding 3 distinct factors: the intensity of the threatened harm, the timing of whether the threat is immediate or impending, and our ability to cope through active measures. By recognizing the sudden shift of surprise for the fleeting bridge that it is, and by understanding how our fears are magnified by our inability to act, we gain a crucial foothold. We learn that while we cannot always control the sudden, unexpected noises in the dark, we can deeply understand the biological armor our bodies put on, allowing us to navigate the terrifying moments of life with greater grace and enduring courage. Chapter 8. The Boundary Markers. Exploring disgust and contempt. Imagine opening your refrigerator after returning from a long, exhausting trip. You reach for a container of milk, unscrew the cap, and take a casual sip. The very instant the sour, curdled liquid hits your tongue, your body reacts with a violent, uncontrollable spasm. You instantly gag, your nose wrinkles sharply upward, and your tongue pushes forcefully forward to expel the poison. This is the raw, biological baseline of disgust. It is an ancient, hardwired alarm system designed with one singular, life-saving purpose: to protect you from taking in something toxic. Disgust reactions make us incredibly cautious about indulging in activities that literally or figuratively might poison us. The impulse is never to step closer, investigate, or negotiate. The overpowering biological impulse in disgust is to forcefully get rid of the offensive object, whether by turning away, gagging, or vomiting. It starts with spoiled food, but as human beings develop, this biological reflex expands into something far more complex and socially profound. We do not just feel disgusted by rotten meat or physical contamination. We learn to feel disgusted by behaviors, ideas, and even other people. We develop moral disgust. Think about hearing a news story detailing a corrupt leader stealing money meant for a children's charity. You might literally say, "That makes me sick." Your body will actually mimic the exact same physical revulsion you felt toward the spoiled milk. We use this intense emotion to draw a firm, unyielding boundary between what we consider clean, righteous, and safe, and what we deem contaminated. But this protective wall has a dark, isolating shadow. Because the physical and psychological impulse of disgust is so absolute, when we direct it at another human being, we completely sever our shared humanity. We no longer see them as a flawed person worthy of empathy. We treat them as a toxin that must be expelled from our presence. This profound rejection often travels with a quieter but far more destructive companion. While disgust seeks to expel, contempt seeks to elevate. Contempt is fundamentally a feeling of being better than another person. It is the sensation of absolute superiority. Whether we feel morally purer, intellectually sharper, or socially higher than the individual standing in front of us. When we feel contempt, our deeply ingrained biological impulse is to physically and psychologically look down upon the object of our scorn. Interestingly, while all other universal emotional expressions pull equally on both sides of the face, contempt is unique. It is the only emotion that reveals itself in an asymmetrical smirk. One corner of the lip tightens and raises slightly. It is a subtle, almost imperceptible sneer, but the damage that tiny, momentary muscular movement can inflict on a relationship is catastrophic. Think about a long-term relationship that is slowly beginning to fray under the weight of unsaid resentments. Two partners are arguing in the kitchen about how to load the dishwasher, a seemingly trivial, mundane conflict. But as one partner passionately explains their logic, the other does not argue back with anger. Instead, they roll their eyes, let out a harsh, dismissive breath, and the corner of their mouth pulls up into that distinct, one-sided smirk. In that singular moment, they are not just disagreeing about household chores. They are communicating that their partner is fundamentally beneath them. They are broadcasting that their partner's thoughts are absurd, incompetent, and unworthy of basic respect. Strangely enough, feeling contempt can actually be quite an enjoyable emotion for the person experiencing it. There is a dark, intoxicating thrill in feeling smarter, stronger, or more righteous than someone else. It provides a massive, temporary boost to our own ego, acting as a shield against our own insecurities. But this private enjoyment is pure poison to human connection. When you look down on someone with contempt, genuine empathy becomes completely impossible. You cannot deeply connect with a person you have relegated to a lower tier of existence. This is why contempt is widely recognized by behavioral experts as the single greatest predictor of relationship failure. It acts as an acid poured directly onto the foundation of trust and mutual respect. Often, we do not experience these boundary markers in isolation. Some people frequently merge their disgust directly with their anger. They do not just feel frustrated by a colleague's mistake, they feel actively repulsed by the colleague, viewing them simultaneously as an obstacle to be attacked and a toxin to be avoided. This combination is incredibly dangerous because it entirely dehumanizes the target, stripping away the natural restraints that normally keep our human anger from becoming cruel and abusive. Or a person might direct that toxic cocktail inward, feeling profound disgust with themselves for losing control and showing fear or anger in the first place. Our ability to feel disgust undeniably keeps us safe from physical harm, and our capacity to recognize social hierarchies is a deeply embedded part of our evolutionary history. But we must be fiercely vigilant about how we deploy these emotions in our daily lives. They are the ultimate boundary markers, designed to keep the bad out. If we allow them to run unchecked, if we make a daily habit of rolling our eyes and looking down our noses at the people in our lives, we will eventually find ourselves standing entirely alone behind a perfectly constructed, impenetrable wall. To tear down that wall, we must consciously return to the lighter, expansive spectrum of human connection. We must explore the emotions that draw us in, open us up, and make the heavy burden of survival completely worthwhile. Chapter 9. The Lightness of Being, the Spectrum of Joy. We have spent a great deal of time exploring the heavy, armored emotions that keep us alive. Fear, anger, sadness, and disgust are the brilliant ancient defense mechanisms designed to protect us from a world that is often dangerous and unpredictable. But survival alone is not enough. If we were only wired to avoid threats, human existence would be a grim, grey endurance test. What actually makes the heavy lifting of survival worthwhile? What is the invisible, magnetic force that pulls us forward, motivates our most profound sacrifices, and makes us want to wake up in the morning? It is the pursuit of joy. We organize our entire lives, our careers, our friendships, and our quietest moments in a desperate, beautiful attempt to maximize our experience of positive emotions. Yet, when we talk about these feelings, we often rely on a single, drastically inadequate word: happiness. Using the word happiness to describe the full spectrum of human joy is like using the word weather to describe everything from a gentle spring breeze to a brilliant, sunlit afternoon. It is simply not specific enough to capture the rich, varied topography of our positive experiences. The enjoyable emotions are actually a massive, diverse family of feelings. Amusement, relief, sensory pleasure, and the quiet swell of pride are entirely distinct emotional experiences, differing as wildly from one another as terror differs from rage. Consider the profound, overwhelming emotion of relief. Relief is a unique kind of joy because it can only exist in the shadow of suffering or intense fear. Imagine a family sitting in the sterile, fluorescent waiting room of a hospital. A loved one has been in a severe accident, and the family has been sitting in agonizing, terrified suspense for hours. Every muscle in their bodies is pulled tight, their breathing is shallow, and their minds are spinning with catastrophic thoughts. Finally, a doctor pushes through the swinging doors, looks at them, and gives a warm, tired nod. "They are going to be fine," the doctor says. "A full recovery." In that singular fraction of a second, an incredible biological transformation occurs. The terror does not just fade, it instantly evaporates. The physical manifestation of relief is entirely distinct. The rigid, defensive posture completely collapses into a deep, heavy relaxation of the body. A long, involuntary sigh escapes the lips. The family members might slump back into their chairs or lean their entire physical weight against one another. Relief is the beautiful, intoxicating joy of the threat being removed. It is the sudden, glorious absence of pain, and it washes through the nervous system like a warm, settling tide. Now, contrast that quiet, heavy relaxation with the entirely different, explosive energy of amusement. Amusement is a wildly active state. When we experience intense, genuine amusement, we do not slump backward in quiet relief. Our bodies are overtaken by a sudden, rhythmic loss of control. The laughter that bubbles up during deep amusement actually produces repetitive, involuntary bodily movements. Our shoulders shake, our breath comes in rapid, staccato bursts, and our eyes may even fill with tears. Imagine sitting in a high-stakes, intensely formal business meeting. The room is silent, the tension is thick, and everyone is wearing their most polished professional mask. Suddenly, the CEO, a notoriously serious, intimidating figure, leans too far back in their leather chair and gracefully, silently tips entirely backward, disappearing under the mahogany table with a soft thud. For 2 seconds, there is absolute paralyzed shock. And then the CEO's hand reaches up, gives a slow thumbs-up sign, and a single suppressed snort escapes from someone at the back of the room. Instantly, the entire room shatters into uncontrollable laughter. The formal masks dissolve. People are wiping their eyes, clutching their sides, and leaning forward. In that moment of shared amusement, all the rigid corporate hierarchy completely vanishes. Laughter is a profound social equalizer. It forcefully removes our armor and connects us in a shared, joyful vulnerability. There is also the quiet, internal warmth of pride. This is not the toxic, arrogant superiority of contempt, but the deep, authentic satisfaction that comes from achieving something immensely difficult. Think of an older adult who has spent their entire life struggling with literacy, quietly sitting at a kitchen table night after night, tracing letters and sounding out syllables. After months of grueling, unseen frustration, they finally read an entire letter from their grandchild without stumbling. The emotion that fills the room at that moment is powerful. The physical impulse in pride is often to sit up straighter, to lift the chin, to expand the chest. It is a deeply grounding emotion, a quiet celebration of human resilience, and the sudden, beautiful realization of one's own capability. What is absolutely fascinating about this vast, varied family of enjoyable emotions is how they broadcast themselves to the world. If you were to look at the face of the family receiving the good medical news, the executives laughing in the boardroom, and the adult reading the letter, you would see the exact same facial expression. The happy emotions do not have entirely different faces. They all share one universal type of smiling countenance. The corners of the lips pull upward, and the muscles around the eyes contract, creating the unmistakable crinkled warmth of genuine joy. Because the face uses the same fundamental mask for all these different feelings, the face alone cannot tell us the full story. The different types of happiness might be hinted at by how quickly the smile flashes or how long it lingers on the face, but the face is not the primary broadcaster here. The primary signal system for our happy emotions is actually the voice. If you close your eyes and listen to the world, the spectrum of joy becomes incredibly distinct. You can hear the heavy exhaled breath of relief. You can hear the staccato rhythmic barking of amusement. You can hear the low, vibrating hum of sensory pleasure, or the clear, steady resonance of quiet pride. Our voices are the true, nuanced instruments of our joy, singing the specific melody of our happiness into the world around us. When we finally understand the rich complexity of these positive emotions, we realize that building a good life is not simply about chasing a vague, generic concept of happiness. It is about actively cultivating a rich, diverse, emotional diet. It is about allowing ourselves to feel the profound, relaxing gravity of relief. It is about maintaining the humility required to be utterly ambushed by amusement. It is about tackling difficult things so we can earn the quiet, expansive posture of pride. These enjoyable emotions are not just the reward for surviving the difficult parts of life, they are the very substance of life itself. They are the light that makes the heavy lifting of existence completely, unarguably worth it. Chapter 10. The Mastered Life. Harmonizing emotion and reality, we have traveled a tremendous distance together, descending into the dark, protective depths of fear and anger, exploring the heavy gravity of sorrow, and rising into the expansive, illuminating atmosphere of joy. By now, you understand that your feelings are not random, chaotic weather events sent to disrupt your life. They are a brilliant, ancient, and deeply intricate survival system. But understanding the mechanics of an engine does not automatically make you a master driver. As we stand at the culmination of this journey, we must ask the most vital question of all. How do we take this profound knowledge and weave it into the beautiful, messy, day-to-day reality of a human life? The goal has never been to eradicate our feelings or to build a life of flat, stoic indifference. The ultimate goal is harmony. It is learning to ride the massive waves of our internal ocean without allowing them to capsize the boat. To achieve this harmony, we must first make peace with the unalterable truth of our own unique emotional fingerprints. You have likely noticed throughout your life that people respond to the exact same environment with wildly different emotional cadences. Think of two siblings who are suddenly faced with the exact same stressful event, perhaps the unexpected loss of a shared family business. The first sibling might react with a sudden explosive surge of panic and anger that peaks in minutes, burns incredibly hot, and then rapidly dissipates, leaving them ready to problem solve. The second sibling might not seem to react at all in the initial moment, but over the following weeks, a slow, grinding, heavy despair settles into their bones, taking months to fully clear. Neither of these siblings is fundamentally broken. They simply possess entirely different emotional profiles, a concept known as affective style. Every single human being varies in how quickly an emotion is triggered, how intensely that emotion burns, and how long it takes for the nervous system to recover and return to baseline. Some of us are built with a short, rapid fuse, while others are slow to ignite but burn for a very long time. This unique emotional makeup is deeply influenced by our genetic inheritance and our early environment, meaning that our baseline is largely woven into our biology. True emotional mastery begins with radical acceptance. You cannot trade your emotional nervous system for someone else's. If you are a person who feels things with sudden, intense velocity, fighting against your own nature will only exhaust you. Mastery is not about changing your fundamental blueprint. It is about knowing your own architecture so perfectly that you can anticipate the structural weak points before the storm hits. Once we accept our unique baseline, living a mastered life requires the relentless, courageous cultivation of 4 distinct skills. The first, and arguably the most difficult, is developing the capacity to become consciously aware of when you are becoming emotional before you speak or act. This is the holy grail of emotional intelligence. It is the ability to sit in a tense negotiation, feel the sudden physical heat rising in your chest, and silently say to yourself, I am becoming angry right now, before a single defensive word leaves your mouth. It requires treating your physical body as an early warning system, using the tightening of your jaw or the shallowness of your breath as a trigger for profound self-awareness. The second skill flows naturally from the first. Once you are aware of the feeling, you must choose how you behave. The ultimate purpose of our emotional episodes is to help us achieve our goals, whether that is drawing a friend close for comfort or establishing a firm boundary against a threat. But the most masterful emotional expressions are those that achieve these vital goals without causing unnecessary damage to the people around us. It is the profound discipline of feeling furious, validating that fury internally, but choosing to express it through firm, unyielding calm rather than a destructive shouting match. You are honoring the spark, but consciously refusing to burn the house down. The third skill shifts our focus outward, demanding that we become deeply sensitive to how others are feeling. Because our emotions are at the absolute core of every important relationship we will ever have, we cannot navigate life blindly. We must become dedicated students of the human face and voice. This is an active, daily practice. It means pulling your attention away from the distracting glow of your own thoughts and looking truly, deeply at the people sitting across from you. It is training your eye to catch the subtle, fleeting signs of an emotion just beginning to form. It is noticing the momentary, almost imperceptible pulling together of the inner eyebrows that signals hidden sorrow, or the slight, rapid thinning of the lips that betrays concealed anger. Imagine sitting at a kitchen table with a friend who is cheerfully insisting that their recent job loss is a wonderful opportunity. Their words are completely optimistic, but because you have cultivated this third skill, you notice a subtle, involuntary drooping of their upper eyelids and a momentary lack of tone in their cheeks. You see the heavy, unspoken weight of grief leaking through the brave mask. This brings us to the fourth and final skill, which requires the ultimate grace, using the information you acquire about others carefully and compassionately. Just because you can read the subtle, hidden pain on your friend's face does not give you the right to forcefully strip their mask away. Emotional mastery is not about playing a brilliant, aggressive psychologist. Sometimes, using the information carefully means acknowledging their feeling gently by saying, "This must be a really heavy transition for you." But often, it means saying nothing at all about what you see. It simply means pouring them another cup of coffee, speaking a little softer, and ensuring they know they are not alone. You adjust your own behavior to cradle the vulnerability they are not yet ready to vocalize. When you dedicate your life to these practices, when you own your unique emotional rhythm, when you insert a wedge of daylight between your feelings and your actions, and when you read the world with a gentle, observant compassion, everything changes. The world ceases to be a chaotic battlefield of mysterious clashing reactions. You begin to see the invisible threads threads that connect us all. You realize that the arrogant coworker is actually broadcasting subtle, desperate signs of fear, and your resentment naturally softens into pity. You realize that your partner's sudden withdrawal is not a lack of love, but an overwhelmed nervous system seeking safety, and your defensive anger melts into patience. Emotions are the ultimate driving force of our lives. They dictate every major choice we make, from who we marry to how we spend our quietest afternoons. They override our hunger, they conquer our physical pain, and they compel us to perform acts of breathtaking sacrifice and beautiful courage. We do not want to live without them. To be human is to be a vessel for the entire glorious spectrum of feeling. By embracing this truth, by doing the quiet, relentless work of understanding the sparks within yourself and the subtle signals in the faces around you, you step out of the shadows and into the light. You are no longer a passive passenger on the ride of your own life. You are the architect of your own heart, fully equipped to live deeply, love fiercely, and navigate the beautiful, turbulent waters of the human experience with enduring, masterful grace.